Welcome back to Gimme Some Truth, another episode with Nate Condon, Clint Walkner, and we are back in the booth talking a little bit about Social Security and conventional wisdom. And you brought this idea to me, and I thought it was an excellent idea. You know, every once in a while we kind of sit down and we discuss topics, and there's things that just become conventional wisdom in our industry. And one of those things is delay Social Security until you're 70 years old, maximizes your benefit. And we've kind of like checked the box on that. And you brought me some reasons and some things to ponder and think about where conventional wisdom, I think, should be challenged in this situation. So today in this podcast, we want to explore those a little bit more and flip it on its head and say, why not take it at age 62 or 63 instead of age 70? And so let's lay out first, I think, the case to why you would delay and why the conventional wisdom is stuck around age 70.
Yeah. I mean, it's not disputed that if you live long enough, you will get more money out of the system by waiting until 70, right? I mean, that's a fact. It's about kind of 81, 82. If you live beyond that, then you're going to get, quote, more money out of this. So the total amount that you've gotten out of the system will be more than if you turn it on at 66 or 62, right? So that is a fact. But I think that we have looked at it with that being the only mandate in some cases, because we know the value of more money versus less money, but not really thinking about what that money does for us, right? So I think the math, we've fallen into a trap a little bit of just saying the math says that this path gives us the most money, so therefore this is the path that we should go on.
Exactly. We're running a math equation. We're just saying it gives us the most at the end.
And it's true. It does. It gives us the most money, right? So if that is your mandate, then that is what you should do, right?
And conventionally we say things like, well, if you had a bad family history, then you should maybe consider that. Or if you had personal health problems, then perhaps you should consider that. But I think there's a lot more nuance to it as well. And it's not so much of a right or wrong answer as well, because we don't know how long we're going to live. And there are some externalities in there too that I think are important to at least ponder now. I mean, one thing that I read here, and I wanted to get your comments on that, but you know, I read here, given that retirees aged 75 plus spend 45% less than those aged 55 to 64, how can claiming at Social Security at 62 help retirees meet higher spending needs in their early retirement years, like travel or hobbies, while relying less on savings as expenses decline later?
Yeah, so that's one kind of avenue to approach or to discuss, right? Where you need the money, right? That in a lot of cases is a decision that is almost then made for you, or it's kind of decisions that's taken out of your hands. If you need the money at 62 or 63 or 64, then you kind of have to turn it on, right? That is the option that you have. It's the option that you probably should go with because it's guaranteed. You can't outlive it. It has those qualities that you want. So in those situations, I think you can make a strong argument for why you would turn it on at 62 or 63 or 4 or whatever it might be. Or again, you have extenuating circumstances because of your own health or your family's health history, which indicates that you have a higher likelihood that you won't make it until your early 80s, right? Those I think are the kind of the what I'll refer to as more of the more kind of well thought of or well thought out reasons as to why you would take it early. But I think unfortunately for advisors, we then focus on almost that alone. So therefore, okay, the client doesn't need the money, isn't solely reliant upon the money at 62, and their family health history is good and their health history is good, therefore wait till 70, right? I think we just then default to the other option, which is the one that gives us the most money.
That's exactly right. And I want to focus on kind of another point of this is that when we're age 80 and we are going out, we're probably not going to Nordstrom and buying all new clothes.
Right.
And we're probably not going, and I usually like to say tongue in cheek to a bunch of our clients, you're probably sharing that plate at dinner and you're eating at 4:00, and
Right.
we like to make light of that, but we're consuming less as we age. We actually don't need, when we look at our physiology, we actually don't need as many calories when we're older as when
Right.
we're younger. So those sorts of things exist there. And we might not be doing as much international, super expensive travel
Right.
when we're in our 80s or
Might
90s.
not be doing as many things with their kids and grandkids and doing those. I think you would almost refer to them as those more adventurous things, right? When you're 80 versus when you're 65.
Yeah, and so I think the moral of the story there is, while you are able to do those things by turning on Social Security early, it's unlocking the ability to perhaps take that extra trip, to gain those extra experiences, to buy those nicer seats at that concert or at that venue where you're going to see somebody. And, it might be worth it to you and your family to be able to do that little splurge for yourself by taking that Social Security early.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of what we're referring to today or talking about today, which is the idea that if you define success based on experiences and then the kind of the compounding effect of those experiences, right? So I can take a trip from 62 to 70 every day with my family. And because I turned on Social Security and I have this extra $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month, whatever it might be, it won't be 3,000 at 62, but whatever that number is, if I can upgrade that vacation, if I can include all of the grandkids, if I can do all of those things as a result, then I am changing the bogey from the maximum amount of payout to I want the most life experiences, and Social Security allows me then to be able to do that. I think that's a viable path, right? I think that's a path that most of us don't think about, is the money that we get from 62 to 70, those 8 years, right? And we compare that, or we kind of see what that does for us during those years of our life, knowing that we will accept less money in our 70s and 80s and 90s if we make it that far. But is that 8 years of extra money worth it for the experiences that we're able to get during that time? And I think that's the comparison that people don't do that maybe they should do.
And the other thing too is you have flexibility when you turn that income on. So, 2 years you decide to take those blowout trips, and then in year 3, 4, and 5, you decide that you want to save that money and you want to plow it back into investments. I mean, you have that money then, the bird in the hand there. And one thing that I kind of wanted to mention is that, and people have brought it up to us, and I don't think that it's an unreasonable thing to think about. And that is that Social Security system does have a shortfall in the future, and how that shortfall is going to be plugged. We commonly tell people, I don't think you have to worry about it. It's an easier program to shore up. However, our budget deficits are terrible, and they're not going to get any better coming up soon in all likelihood. So unless we see a massive reversion or reform of some of these entitlement programs, we are kicking the can down the road when maybe massive changes will have to hit Social Security.
Yeah, I think we're optimistic about the solutions, right? And that they will get it fixed. It's the powers that be don't need to fix it today, so they are choosing not to today, right? But we think that it'll get fixed. But that is something to keep in mind, right? I think the bigger message from the podcast and the discussion today is simply to think in terms of your Social Security benefit as, what do I want this to do for me? Right. And I would start thinking about that in your late 50s or early 60s and having conversations with us or whoever it is that you seek out advice from. What do I want that money to do for me? Right. As opposed to or in conjunction with. Right. What does the math say? What gives me the most money? I think that by starting the conversation with what I want it to do for me and less about just the only path being what gives me the most is how we want to think about it. At least that's the advice that I would give somebody today, as opposed to say a month ago or a week ago. Is what do we want it to do for us, and then have that conversation. And we might end up still recommending that we take it at 70, but we've had that conversation. Is, do we need this money? Do we want this money to be able to provide things for us from 62 to 70 that wouldn't necessarily be possible without this money? And then are we willing to forego the extra money, post 70, for what we get from 62 to 70, or 66 to 70, or however you cut those numbers.
Yeah, it could be a conversation of, are you focusing on handing off multi-generational wealth and maximizing that? Well, perhaps then delaying is the best. We still have to stay, active and healthy in order to do that. Or we're saying, hey, while I live, and that's kind of the book that I really like, that, Die with Zero book that you see sometimes. I think it's a reasonable story inside of there saying, hey, you should spend your money to have your own experiences. Well, if you can spend your money and have your experiences out of that Social Security bucket of money, and we can preserve some of that other money,
right?
Then maybe it's better to delay that money as well. We don't have to take that out of some of those accounts or those Roth IRAs where it's super tax protected and would be great legacy assets. So, we're going versus an income stream versus assets. Or if we had highly appreciated stocks, maybe turning on Social Security at age 62 does make more sense to bring in the income stream and to not hit it. Or perhaps if we have a big down market, to kind of protect those assets as well, turning on Social Security may also be a reasonable alternative too.
I think that where we would direct somebody the opposite direction would be if somebody said, if the question was posed to them to say, what are we going to do with the money turning on at 62 or 63 or 64? And they said, well, I'll just put it in my savings account. Then you're better off waiting. I think that's a pretty clear indication that maybe we're better off waiting. Maybe we'll find something at 66 that requires that money, or that makes us want to turn on that stream, but maybe we hadn't had that in front of us at 63 or 64. Okay, then probably wait, because if all we're going to do is just stick it in our savings account, then we are better getting the 8% bump that we get every year that we wait. But if we would do something with that money and we thought creatively about it, and it was something that we said, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. Now we're thinking about it differently, and I think that that's ultimately where we want to be. Again, a $1,500 benefit, 12 months of a $1,500 benefit is $18,000. So if you thought back and go, for $18,000 in one calendar year, what can I do with that money? You might end up coming up with a myriad of things that you'd want to do that you wouldn't have done had you not turned on that benefit.
Exactly. And we say that with a little bit of the caveat that you got to be careful if you're working during these periods of time.
There's a lot of variables that go into it. Absolutely.
You definitely want to run the math on that, the taxation of it, all of the different factors inside of it. It's not just I need the money for someone to turn it on. We have to help our clients do the math and make sure that it makes sense for them to do it. And then we kind of check that box and say, yeah, we bless that. I think that's a good idea. I think it takes, as a financial advisor, the absolutes out of it. It's important for us not to be absolutionists and just be like, hey, you're going to take it at 70 because that just maximizes your benefit. And we need to, in our industry, be better about listening to our clients more about what their objectives are and saying, well, maybe that's not bad to take it early, actually, because what you say about the system is valid. What you say about the income, or what you say about what you can do with the money is all, and it's your money. You've put in all these work years, so we should be able to work around your objectives. Yeah,
I think, again, it just kind of reiterating the whole purpose of the podcast today is just thinking about the objectives differently, thinking about it from the standpoint of, again, what do we want it to do for us, and maybe not solely what gives me the most money.
Exactly. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave some comments if you have questions about it, or have a few comments yourself about our thoughts on Social Security, and we'll catch you again on another episode of Gimme Some Truth.
Walkner Condon Financial Advisors is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The opinions expressed by the participants of this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Walkner Condon Financial Advisors. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Thanks for listening, and for further information, please visit WalknerCondon.com.